Hello, everybody. This is Chip Coldren. How are we doing today?
Good. Good. Hi.
We have pretty close to 40 people on the line here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started since we were supposed to start at 1 o'clock. I normally make a few introductory remarks on behalf of the Bureau of Justice Assistance and Smart Policing Initiative, so I'm going to do that. Quickly introduce our instructor today, Hildy Saizow, go over a few logistics, and then we'll get the show on the road, okay? So welcome to the Smart Policing Initiative webinar on effective collaboration. This is one of a series of webinars and educational materials developed in collaboration with the Bureau of Justice Assistance and CNA, along with our team of subject matter experts, to support the implementation of smart policing practices around the country. Today, we are pleased and proud to have Hildy Saizow with us. She's one of our subject matter experts and has spent a good portion of her professional career in state and local government and in her community advocacy work, developing and supporting collaborations and partnerships of various kinds. I will gladly turn this webinar over to her in about a minute. I just want to make a couple notes and remind everybody that this webinar is recorded. And when they're completed, we put them up on the website for other people to hear. So whatever you say will be heard. We also evaluate these, as most of you know. So after the webinar is concluded, you will receive an email, a brief evaluation form. We ask that you spend some time and complete that. I'd also like to let everybody know that we have several other webinars in development right now. I'm working on one with Mike White from Glendale, Arizona State University, on the problem-oriented policing and the SARA model. We have another one on leadership under development, another interesting one on how to be a smart police officer. So you'll be hearing about those soon. As most of you know, these webinars are meant to be participatory, so there'll be several points along the way where we stop and ask a few questions. And we always have the chat room available. If you can't get your question in over voice, feel free to use the chat room and ask any questions that you want. If we don't get answers to them right away, we will get you an answer as soon as we possibly can. We also ask you to remember that anytime you want any information about smart policing or any questions of us, you can send an email note to spi@cna.org. So that's my message for today. I want to thank Hildy. I want to thank Iris and Vivian for being our backup and our coordinators. But thank you all again for joining us. And Hildy, let's turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chip. Well, welcome to everyone on the phone to this webinar on effective collaboration. We hope it provides you food for thought as well as some new ideas and solutions to some of the issues you're facing in your own community and your own smart policing site. I know that outreach and collaboration are key components of smart policing, and when they work well, collaborations can really provide some greater chances for all of us for success. But when things do go astray, some frustrations can mount and collaboration no longer seems so promising. So this webinar is designed to address collaboration issues that many of you are facing, many concerns that you have raised, and also to begin a dialogue to discuss and learn from each other. So we're going to do something a little different today in that we're bringing in some representatives from our smart policing sites to give examples of collaboration that they're engaging in. But there's also going to be certain points in the discussion where I'll open it up and you all can discuss among each other or give each other ideas or ask questions. So please feel free to bring up your ideas, to ask those questions, and to join in. So let's get started. Here's what we're going to accomplish over the next hour or so, and it may run 15 minutes over, but we're going to talk about the overall benefits of collaboration. We're going to talk about reaching out to non-traditional stakeholders, reaching out to the hard-to-reach stakeholders, managing those challenging partners, And we're also going to talk about assessing and evaluating collaboration. So we'll start the discussion with a quick overview of collaboration. You may want to jot down some questions or thoughts as we move along so that you're ready to participate in the group discussion at a few points in the webinar. But first, collaboration is a critical component of both community policing and smart policing. Now, federally supported policing initiatives have long encouraged and even required collaborative approaches, and many of you have probably been involved in those. For example, Weed and Feed initiatives involve collaborations of law enforcement working with human services agencies, as well as community-based organizations and residents. Project Safe Neighborhoods, on the other hand, focus on collaborations of police and prosecutor agencies, but at all levels of government. And this was mainly an agency-based approach to collaboration. MEF collaborations, perhaps many of you who have been involved in those, really involved a wide variety of agencies from a whole range of sectors, but all folks with experience in the issue of drug abuse or enforcement, prevention, and rehab. Now, all these various approaches can in fact work, just depending on the purpose and goals of your initiative. So what do we really mean when we are talking about collaboration? Well, collaboration is a form of community interaction, but it's the most complex form. So if you think of community interaction as a continuum, as I show here on the slide, then outreach is the least complex form. Community outreach focuses on mainly information sharing and communicating with the public. But it really primarily involves one-way, mostly police-driven communication. So think community meetings or driving campaigns. Now moving down the continuum, you see consultation. It involves information sharing, as well as stakeholder input and buy-in. Using community surveys, for example, to study crime problems, or town hall forums, or this type of work. Now coordination goes further down the continuum by allowing agencies working together to share information and resources, which hopefully reduces duplication and gains some efficiencies. So think drug enforcement operations that are involving not only police, working with county and state task forces, but with the DEA and the FBI. But collaborative partnerships go much, much further and further down the continuum. They bring together both multiple agencies and community members and community groups to address complex issues by sharing responsibility, sharing resources, and even sharing decision-making. So the power of this form of collaboration is really in the sharing. That adds some tremendous value, and if implemented well, results in more innovative, more effective, and efficient strategies and outcomes. So what does this continuum mean for law enforcement? Well, I think it's important to look at the continuum and see where you and your agency fit in terms of community interaction you engage in. Now, what we find is that most often departments engage in these less complex forms of community interaction, and they are doing that fairly often. But few agencies and departments actually engage in the more complex form of collaborative partnership. So let's review the benefits of collaboration and remember why it's worth the effort and the commitment. So first, one of the cornerstones of successful policing is having the public's cooperation and trust. So collaboration can help build that cooperation, particularly in neighborhoods where trust may be lacking. Perhaps there are naysayers in the community or those people who are skeptical of police action. So by involving them in collaborative processes, giving them an actual voice and some input to what you're doing, you may be able to co-opt them in a way so that they become supporters of the police. If all partners are asked to bring resources to the table, then collaboration results in that greater pool of resources for addressing some of those difficult issues. And by having a number of people at the table from various agencies with different perspectives and different life experiences, The potential for innovation or even thinking outside the box when you're doing things is vastly increased. You know, former Police Chief William Bratton has co-authored a book on collaboration recently, and he said, collaboration allows you to do things you would do anyway, but you do them better, faster, cheaper. So another way of looking at this is to look at the risks of not reaching out or not collaborating with stakeholders. So what would we miss out on? Well, no collaboration clearly would allow us to miss out on some valuable input and valuable support from the community. No collaboration would mean some loss of funding from grant opportunities that require collaboration. No collaboration would mean no resource sharing and possible duplication of efforts across agencies. No collaboration might mean potential embarrassment if other agencies have targeted similar problems and leading to that duplication issue. And no collaboration could mean less potential for long-term change and sustainability of your efforts. Now, although you can use various approaches to outreach, there are certain key elements that are critical to successful collaboration. No doubt about it, outreach and collaboration require tremendous effort and commitment, particularly collaborative partnerships, which are those more complex forms of interaction. This is why successful collaborations also require support at the highest levels of the department, starting with the chief, who may need to be involved at certain points of your collaborative work. Collaborations must be grounded in a common vision and goals, so that all of the partners, all the collaborators have input and a clear understanding of the project's purpose. Success also means taking a very planned, strategic approach from the outset, not winging it as you move along. And also something that's important now is to take advantage of the changes in technology, particularly social marketing, which has opened up vast opportunities for much more efficient and more frequent communicating with stakeholders and even with residents in the neighborhoods you work in. That's really adding a new dimension that maybe makes things easier in this whole world of collaboration. So last year, CNA staff asked smart policing representatives what they'd like to address in a webinar like this one. Now, the response revolved around 3 key issues, which is why we selected these. How to involve non-traditional stakeholders, how to reach out to those hard-to-reach stakeholders, and managing challenging partners. But we also added a 4th topic to the webinar, one that we think is really crucial, and that's issues related to assessing or evaluating collaboration. So let's get started with the first issue, reaching out to those hard-to-reach stakeholders or non-traditional stakeholders. So why do we even want to reach out to non-traditional stakeholders or people we don't typically work with? Well, these folks can help identify new ways to deal with some of these long-standing problems or even new emerging issues that are difficult to deal with. These non-traditional stakeholders can help build greater community support for your efforts. And most importantly, they can bring some new skills and expertise to the table when you're addressing these issues and create some new synergy so that you're being more creative, get some new thinking that can result in more innovation and potentially greater success in what you're trying to achieve. So when you're thinking about non-traditional stakeholders, cast the stakeholder net really broadly. And think about answering these questions. Who cares about the problem you're addressing? Who's impacted by that problem? Who can help solve the problem or bring skills or knowledge about the problem? Or who has diverse viewpoints about the issue? And who can help sustain your success in the long term? The answer to these questions can point out some of these atypical stakeholders who you might be able to bring to the table. So who are they? Well, some ideas. When you're talking about reaching out to the community, think about youth themselves and youth serving agencies. Oftentimes our strategies are addressing the problems with youth involved in crime. So let's get young people's perspective and involve them in your initiatives from the outset, or people who know a lot about young people, your youth providers. Probation, parole, corrections officials, very important people to bring to the table oftentimes. Healthcare providers can provide a wealth of data and information on issues like violence and substance abuse. But they also offer frameworks for prevention-oriented programs and can be a really important stakeholder. Faith leaders can oftentimes be very important to involve. Business owners in your neighborhood, housing providers, if the issue you're addressing are related to infrastructure, and media representatives can be very important and be on your side if you're trying to send messages to the community that you feel are important about crime prevention, or you're trying to change attitudes and opinions out in the community or community values. So for more ideas on the kinds of stakeholders you might want to consider, be sure to refer to the Collaboration Toolkit. That was one of the pre-readings that we asked you to look at for this webinar, and keep it as a resource that will give you lots of ideas as you move along that continuum of collaboration. In terms of in-reach, we often in smart policing talk about in-reach inside the department. And you might want to involve some more people than you traditionally involve in your initiative. So inside the department, look to your colleagues, but also managers, executives even. These are the folks who can provide you and your initiative some critical support you'll need as you move along, like approvals or resources or additional resources you might need, or input and involvement that you'll need to be successful. So by making these colleagues or managers or executive partners from the outset, together you might be able to push for or provide for motivation for organization-wide change, helping to institutionalize your smart policing successes or other kinds of successes. So how do you reach out to these non-traditional stakeholders? Well, tap into some of your established connections. Approach your police managers or your colleagues, even their spouses. Everyone's tied into some existing network, and they might be able to identify stakeholders that would be important for you to link with. So to get these non-traditional stakeholders interested, you'll have to identify a unifying concept. Have a mission statement that everybody can agree on. Have face-to-face meetings to start with so you get to know these stakeholders. They get to know you. You can agree on what that unifying concept might be. Before you approach individuals from organizations you don't typically work with, do some homework by getting input and advice from some knowledgeable informants, people who do know those stakeholders. Then when you approach those individuals, customize your message to them to fit their perspective of the world or how they would benefit from participating in your initiative. Make it mutually beneficial. Now, if you're bringing together organizations with very different cultures, different ways of doing business, like school districts or health departments, bankers, etc., then it may be a good idea to develop some formal agreements, like a memorandum of understanding, so that from the outset, you're defining roles and responsibilities of all people involved. This will make the partnership processes very clear to everyone. Also, to begin to unify a disparate group of partners, you might want to create some fact sheets or brochures that identify all the participating partners. This will give the partnership a very public face and help to solidify, that unity that you want to achieve. So at this point, I wanted us to focus on a particular example of a smart policing site that's actually reached out to, from the outset of their initiative, some non-traditional stakeholders. So I'm inviting Stacy Shamblin from the Reno Police Department to talk about their smart policing initiative and how they've reached out to these types of stakeholders. Stacy?
Thank you, Hildy. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so just really quick, I'm just going to give a couple of examples of some of the stakeholders that we've reached out to. For those who don't know, our Smart Policing Initiative focuses on prescription drug abuse, and it's mainly prevention-oriented. We also do have an enforcement component. But so the two stakeholders that I'm going to mention are the pharmacists and our county health department and waste management, which are actually two separate entities, but I can group them together for this purpose. So the pharmacists actually have probably been our most successful stakeholder. It's gone great with them. We implemented a lot of the things that Hildy mentioned, particularly making sure that the partnership is mutually beneficial. So what we did when we first reached out to the pharmacists is began to ask them what is their perspective on the drug abuse problem, the prescription abuse problem. What are the issues that they're seeing, things that they are frustrated about? And the answer we got was that they are aware there's prescription fraud occurring, but there is just a lack of response from law enforcement. They felt that when they call, to alert us, nobody's showing up, nobody's investigating or prosecuting those cases, and so they were at a point of frustration that resulted in them just not communicating with law enforcement at all, which is something we needed to fix. So one of the solutions that we implemented was a new fraud alert system where actually one of our detectives who's dedicated to investigating prescription fraud manages the alerts himself. When he finds out that there's somebody who's going around town with a stolen script pad or calling in fake prescriptions, he writes up the alert and he sends it out directly to the pharmacies same day. He tries to get it done within about an hour. And so what that does is gets all the pharmacies on the same page, so we don't have this person going around hitting 10 different pharmacies on the same day. They can get in touch with him directly. He has his cell phone number on the alert so that when there is an issue, the pharmacist isn't having to call just the main police department number and go through an automated system. They're calling a direct person and they have a name and a face to go with it. And that has been huge. We found that just designating a specific person who's going to be investigating those cases, introducing him to them and saying, when you have a prescription fraud problem, this is who you're going to call. My name is Scott Smith. Here's my cell phone number. I will be showing up at your pharmacy. And that has gone a long, long way. Since we've begun educating pharmacists about that, our response rate is just through the roof, and we're getting calls all the time now, which has been great, and been able to get a lot of people arrested as a result of that. And they're cooperating with the investigations really well. We've also been educating the pharmacists about what exactly does a prescription fraud investigation look like, what are the things that we're doing on our end, and then what are we going to need from them, so that they can be aware ahead of time, get their ducks in a row, have the appropriate paperwork, and just make sure that things run more smoothly. So that has been a great collaboration. As a result, we also have a couple of pharmacists who are now involved in our committee that works on prescription drug abuse issues, and they're at all of our meetings giving us their input. Whenever we're thinking about implementing something new with regard to pharmacies or trying a new method to reduce prescription fraud, we can just run it by them. They're right there at the table and say, do you think this would work? As an example, when we first wanted to implement a new fraud alert system, our idea was to do an email alert, and we thought that that would be the most cost-effective way to do it. We pitched that to pharmacists and found their answer back was, we're not even checking our email at work. A lot of them can't even get on the internet at the pharmacy. And so had we not approached them with that first, we would have been completely wasting our time. They came back and said that the fax machine is the way to go, and so that's what we're doing. And the other quick example is county health and waste management. We're obviously primarily concerned about the prescription abuse issue and the associated problems and the deaths that are occurring, but there's also the environmental aspect of improper disposal of prescription drugs. And so from that angle, we're talking with our county health department officials and our waste management company here. Their perspective on the problem is that they want to ensure that all of these prescription medications that are being turned in on our take-back days or in our drop boxes are being disposed of properly, that they're not harming the environment, that we're not just incinerating them in the city and letting the fumes go everywhere. And so We're working together on a couple of those things. When we have our prescription take-back days, we're doing all of the legwork to separate the materials the way that they need them. We have the pills, in one bag, bottles in one bag, sharps, liquids, all of that kind of thing. And the installation of the drop boxes at police stations have been huge. We now have, at the police departments, a drop box where people can come and drop off their prescription medications. And because we have an existing partnership with Waste Management that's been there for a few years, they're more than happy to take those things for us every so often, as long as we have them separated properly, which has been great. So those are just a couple examples that we have, and I will turn it back over to Hildy.
Thank you, Stacy. You provide some great examples of working and collaborating with non-traditional stakeholders. I appreciate it. So let's just stop and think for a few minutes. Give an opportunity if anybody on the phone would like to share their experiences that you've had with non-traditional partners, or ask any questions of some of your colleagues. You're welcome to do so right now. Any thoughts? Okay, well, let's move ahead, and there'll be another opportunity for you to give your ideas or ask questions. So the next topic is reaching out to hard-to-reach stakeholders. Why is it important to reach out or include hard-to-reach groups in a collaboration? Well, since most crime tends to be place-based, particular neighborhoods and communities are more affected. It's essential then that we get input and involvement from groups in these affected communities. The relationships you build with individuals and organizations in these communities really should be mutually beneficial. Whether you live or work or police the communities, all have a stake in the quality of life. So this type of relationship building provides a real pathway to safer neighborhoods and community groups that feel disempowered, and brings them much greater community empowerment. So who are the hard-to-reach groups? Well, these are groups with traits that act as barriers, like culture, language, past experiences, lack of political power, or discrimination. Often the most vulnerable are those most affected by crime and violence. So typically these groups are people of color and minorities, such as African Americans, Asians, or Latinos, but they are also non-English speaking people, illegal immigrants, youth, or even high-risk individuals. So how do we reach out to these groups? Well, the first thing, once you identify the group you're interested in, is do your homework. Learn about that group's culture, their language, their history, their current leadership structure. Early on, meet with formal and informal leaders of that group. Gain their trust, and then they will help you gain the trust of others in the community. Identify nonprofits or churches that provide a critical entree to those groups you're interested in working with. And we know that churches are often the most revered or respected institution in some neighborhoods. So faith-based leaders may be the first individuals to approach about a new initiative. In immigrant communities, it may be a nonprofit set up to work with refugees or provide language services. Starting with these groups may give you some important perspectives and understanding, as well as entree to the wider community. Survey group members, or run focus groups to get input and perspectives from that group. The Winston-Salem Smart Policing Initiative did just that. The site realized they needed to mobilize the community in order to sustain some achievements, but they found it difficult to mobilize minority residents. So they started with focus groups, getting 10 or so individuals in the group together to seek their input, their insights, and their perspectives on both crime and their relationship with the police. Create a community resource position. Fill it with a member of the community that you'd like to work with. Now, the Palm Beach Smart Policing Initiative did just that, and we're going to hear from their community resource officer in just a couple of minutes with a concrete example of this. Seek out some cultural awareness training so that you and your officers or others in your department can learn the history of the group you're working with, some sources of distrust so you're aware of it, some cultural and language differences. And when you're working with these groups, be sure to find common ground. Work together where you can agree, and respect those elements where you don't. Because there's always going to be issues that, or perspectives that don't necessarily mesh, but focus on those areas where you can agree first. And use your local media to reach out to specific groups. Whether you want to educate people on crime prevention or ask people to report crime or go the next step and attempt to actually change norms and behaviors, the media can help you meet those objectives. Now, the article I asked you to read on effective marketing practices as one of the pre-readings provides a great deal of information on the various communication channels that you can use to get your messages across to these communities, like speaking on radio talk shows or creating public service announcements for radio directed at particular audiences like youth or Spanish language audiences. Also, use messages on bus benches, billboards, posters, and get your messages in newspaper articles or put them out at press conferences. And what you see at the bottom of the slide is a billboard that we have used in Phoenix each December to address a particular problem that we experience here in the Southwest, and that's random gunfire, or simply shooting in the air on holidays like New Year's Eve. The police work with my nonprofit, and together we ask school kids all across the city to create artwork that will educate their families, their brothers, their uncles, their friends on the dangers of random gunfire. And then we put the winning artwork on a billboard, along with the slogan, Celebration Gunfire Kills, which is what this billboard displays on the slide. We use the billboards and we locate them in neighborhoods with large numbers of Mexican immigrants, which is where most of our Celebration Gunfire occurs, along with numerous press conferences, newspaper articles on the topic, and a special enforcement initiative on the actual holiday. Over the last 7 years of all this work, we have experienced a 64% reduction in celebratory gunfire on New Year's Eve. Now, what have we learned? Well, we certainly learned that partnering on public education strategies can, in fact, be very, very powerful. So to sum up, here are strategies for reaching those hard-to-reach groups, some strategies that have really proven to be successful. First of all, be strategic. Develop not one strategy, but a whole range of strategies that fit the situation and certainly fits the group that you want to reach. Be clear, specific, and compelling. Focus on the benefits to all the stakeholders at the table. Think outside the box. Don't just do the same old thing that you've always been doing. Do something different. Think outside the box. And certainly build on relationships. When you're talking community groups, just start slow, but build on those relationships. That's what's really key to being successful in the community. So let's talk about a smart policing example in Palm Beach. And I'm going to turn this over for a few minutes to Benito Gaspar, who is a community outreach liaison and has been doing a lot of this work that I've referred to for the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. Benito?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Benito Gaspar, calling from Florida, Palm Beach, the beautiful state of Florida, nice and sunny. Let me just start off by saying that our Smart Policing Initiative focused on working with a specific group of individuals or demographic, and that is the immigrant community, documented and undocumented. Now, one of the things that we were concerned with in regards to working with this community is the ongoing distress and stereotypes of law enforcement by the immigrant community. Now, the majority of the community that lives in the city of Lake Worth here in Palm Beach, they come from Central America. And the governments in Central America tend to be very paramilitaristic. So they already, when they come into the United States, they already have an idea of what they think an officer is going to do and is going to be about. And they don't realize that we're talking about, we're comparing apples and oranges. Here in the United States, there are rules and regulations as far as what an officer can do and what an officer can't do. Now, this also works both ways, because if you flip the other side of the coin, there is a perception by the law enforcement community of the immigrant community. Some of these stereotypes tend to be that these individuals are not going to cooperate. These individuals are here just to make a quick buck and leave and cause chaos in the community that they reside. Those are just some of the perceptions. Also, one of the key perceptions that I hear from the community in regards to law enforcement is that why are we spending our resources on individuals who are not to be in the United States in the first place? Now, this is something that I hear over and over again, and it's something that I don't combat, but I do try to educate the individual that has this perception. Now, there's a difference between perception and opinion. Everyone is entitled to the opinion, but the perception is an incorrect perception. Another thing that I've encountered was the minimal support from various community leaders. Surprisingly, some of the individuals that put up that were first to put up a roadblock in regards to what the Palm Beach site was trying to do were the various community leaders. They, again, in the past, did not have a good experience, whether it's organizational or personal experience with law enforcement, and that entailed them to have a tainted perception of law enforcement. And last, the uncertainty of the Arizona immigration reform and how it pertains to the state of Florida. For the individuals that are residing in Arizona, they know firsthand how such laws and statutes can have an adverse effect on all the work the law enforcement is trying to accomplish. Some of the occupational barriers that I've encountered through my time here with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office is that most of the time our victims do not provide accurate personal information. Surprisingly, many of them are, maybe surprisingly to you, but many of them are illiterate. I would say about 80% to 85% of our victims are illiterate. Now, they don't, in the city of Lake Worth, there are a lot of homes that are back next to each other, and there are a lot of alleyways. And behind the homes, there are sheds, or what we call out here garages, in which it becomes another part of the home. And a lot of them live in these sheds, in these homes. And so there really is no exact address. So when we do find them, they tend to provide us with just a direction as to where they reside. They don't provide us with the specific number of the house or number of the apartment building with the unit number. Also, the community, the immigrant community, is very transient. They work off the seasons. So during when it's winter time here, they go up north, and when it's winter up north, they come down back to Florida. Now, this creates a major obstacle for law enforcement in regards to providing them the thorough follow-through services that are needed to assist them. We have many cases in the past where we were able to track down the victim, and we're able to prosecute the suspect, but at the end of the day, the victim uproots themselves and don't provide us with any information as to where they moved. Now, that makes it difficult for the state's attorney's office to pursue the charges, and at the end of the day, the suspect gets released, and we're back to square one. Another thing to keep in mind is the majority of our victims are single males, 25 to 35-year-olds, that don't have access to bank accounts. Well, what does that mean? Well, it basically means that these gentlemen, they don't have family, they don't have a structured home life, a nuclear home life, which entails that every time they do earn a little income and they don't have access to a bank account, they maintain the funds in their pockets or within their apartments. And this really affects us in regards to a lot of our victims being victimized and having a lot of funds on the pocket. In the previous slide, you saw this is some of the outreach events that we've had. We had soccer tournaments. We've also done surveys, and we worked a lot with the local churches, as Hildy had mentioned. It's about knowing who your community is and how to reach them. You have to work on their terms. If you work in an agency that has a huge Latino or immigrant community have to work on the terms to understand where they're coming from and what is causing that problem. Some possible solutions in regards to some of the problems that we mentioned earlier. Organize events that foster immigrant understanding of the functions of law enforcement. Events such as meeting with the clergy, meeting with business leaders, creating events like a soccer tournament. We just had our last soccer tournament lasted an entire month for the last 4 weekends in the month of March. From personal experience, I can tell you that it was a lot of hard work, but we did accomplish our goal. We were able to disseminate the information that it is important for the community to call us. We are not immigration. We're here to help them. Second, we created cross-multicultural diversity training, not only for the community but also for law enforcement officials. We created a forum in which both groups sat in and we talked to each other. We worked out a couple of things in regards to explaining what our function is and what are some of the things that the community should expect from us in regards to law enforcement service. Key component right here is involve other organizations and groups in your outreach events. Every time I have an event, I make sure that I invite the blood banks. I make sure that I invite the banks, the local clergy. I make sure I invite Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the Police Athletic League. You want to make sure to introduce different organizations to your demographic, to your community, and vice versa. Introduce the community to other groups that are out there to provide assistance for them. Also, it's very important as a liaison for myself and anyone out there that's working with this community is you have to be up to date on regards to the local, state, and federal immigration laws. As you know, now it's going to be an election year, and there's going to be a lot of touting as what each potential presidential candidate is going to bring to the table, and that will affect not only our society but also your profession if you do work with that community. And last and most importantly, and this is what smart policing is all about, is utilizing data-driven measures to capture that information. It's one thing if I'm out there, for example, on a soccer tournament, and we're creating this event, and we have over 4,500 individuals attended for a whole month. But if there's no way to capture that information of what's going on in the community, then I would hate to say that the activity was for nothing. So in this case, we provided community satisfaction surveys during the entire month, and we were able to gather some information as far as what the perception of the community is, what it is regarding the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office and the service that we provide. And one of the key things that I do mention to them is with their assistance in completing these surveys, it tells us as an organization what is it that we're doing good, but also what is it that we need to improve upon. Because at the end of the day, they are our clients, if we want to use the term, and that's the only way we'll get to know what it is that they want is by them telling us what they want. So,
thank you,
if anyone has questions,
appreciate that. We'll hold off on questions till the end, so let's move ahead as we have quite a bit of information to cover, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you, Benito. Let's move on to the next topic, which is managing challenging stakeholders. So whether you have a small group of collaborators or stakeholders or many individuals at the table, there may be someone who tries to derail your efforts or cause some conflict or bring their own agenda and issues to the meetings you're trying to hold. So here are some ideas and strategies to meet and resolve those kinds of challenges, or just simply to set the right tone. So how you do that? Well, from the outset, communicate in a very clear and compelling way. Have a vision statement. Talk about the benefits to each of the stakeholders. Give them a reason and a compelling reason to be involved in your initiative. Give partners a stake in that collective voice. Develop with everyone involved some common goals, group values, and let everyone agree upon the strategy for achieving your goals. Give partners at the table some individual attention. So you may want to hold one-on-one meetings with potential as well as current partners from time to time. Build trust and resolve any issues that come up outside of the group or outside of your meeting. And continually share information. share decision-making. Make people feel important. Keep them up to date. Now, not everyone will come to the table with the same level of skills and abilities to work in a group. There are likely to be pronounced differences between agency partners at the table and resident partners. They may need to develop the capabilities of the partners, and you can do this in a number of ways. You can inspire everyone at the table with your vision, if it's clear and it's compelling. Inform everyone, all your partners, all the time on progress you're making, and particularly on achievement. Oftentimes we forget to do that, but keep everyone informed. People certainly want to feel like they're making a difference and having an impact. Otherwise, they might lose interest, and then that's where some people derail your efforts. And you can prevent that from happening. And make it clear that each person's opinion is important and actively sought at all times. So who serves in a leadership capacity for your initiative can make a real difference, both symbolically and in practice. So recruit leaders to be individuals with various skills, knowledge, and various kinds of experience. Be sure the leader of your group reflects the diversity of the community that you're working in. And select people to be leaders who limit the potential for conflict. Again, be strategic. So you might want to develop a memorandum of understanding from the outset. That's a formal agreement signed by all the partners at the table, so that it's very clear from the beginning again what the goals and objectives of your initiative are, what the roles and responsibilities of each partner are, what are the expectations for how those partners ought to be involved, method of resolving conflicts, the kinds of resources that each of the partners ought to bring to the table, and a meeting schedule and who should attend those meetings. The MOU allows everyone involved to concretely see that they are agreeing to the same thing. It's also a real tangible reference to refer to when trying to prevent or address some conflicts. Now, the collaboration toolkit, again, that was part of the pre-reading, does a good job of laying out the issues that ought to be addressed in an MOU. So be sure to refer to that toolkit when you're thinking about creating an MOU. Now, sometimes there's tension between criminal justice and community stakeholders. Often that tension exists just because there's a lack of understanding of each other's roles. So cross-training may be worth the effort. Consider having a skilled facilitator run your collaboration meetings and undertake some team-building exercises to enhance trust among your partners. Stay focused. It's very important that the stakeholders remember why they're at the table. So refer to the group's vision and the mission as often as possible. Perhaps create, and I like to tell groups to do this, a really large sign with the group's mission statement printed right on it and hang it on a wall right at the front of any meetings you hold. This will remind the partners why they're there and keep them really from digressing to some of those side issues that don't pertain to the mission. So stay focused. If there are problem partners, perhaps they don't believe what they're doing is important to the city's leadership. We hear that sometimes. So every now and then, and particularly early on in any initiative, invite the chief or an executive in your department to your meeting and ask him or her to give a brief opening statement to show and voice that strong support for your collaborative effort. Start off with the right tone. Now, the quickest way for partners to lose interest is to ask them to attend meetings that simply give information out. These style of meetings are boring, so people can lose interest. So consider how you can bring together partners for a creative or eventful meeting, and always ask the group to make a decision. That's what makes people feel important and that they're making a difference is when they're part of making a decision. Plan the meeting in a way that all are asked or required to participate. that they have a role in that meeting. And be sure to find very public ways to report the group's accomplishments. Be specific about the contributions of any particular partner. Name names. Show appreciation in a very visible way. And of course, take the time to celebrate successes. I think we often are so caught up in the work that we forget to stop and celebrate a success. It's very important for collaborators to do so. And you can find some good tips for these things and other ideas just in the collaboration toolkit. Again, that was part of the pre-reading. So it's time for another smart policing example of what I've just talked about. And I'm going to turn this over to Dalia Blake, the crime analyst and program coordinator for the Savannah-Chatham Metro Police Department. So she can talk about how they have worked with some difficult and challenging partners and made it a real successful collaboration. So Dalia?
Hi, Hildy. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I think so.
All right. Our Smart Policing Initiative focuses on the top 100 violent and repeat offenders and chronic hotspot areas. Just a little background on the Savannah Impact Program. Prior to 2000, the city saw an increase in violent crime, and our city manager and the mayor initiated local partnerships with the Department of Corrections, which encompassed adult probation, and the Georgia Board of Pardons and Parole, Department of Juvenile Justice, and the Department of Labor to create the Savannah Impact Program. Having all of these agencies under one roof basically allows the police department not only to arrest criminals, but to extend themselves as community and problem-oriented policing agents. Effective partnerships with probation and parole. Basically, all the chiefs, directors, etc. from all agencies must be supportive. To get cooperation from all of these agencies, we found that you must have MOUs in place. All of these people in charge of these agencies involved must be in support of the partnership for this reentry collaboration to work. There can't be any discord or friction from all of these in charge, because the staff will see this and then it'll trickle down into the department and into the unit, and it just won't work. To make sure that everybody understands what needs to be done, what each agency needs to bring to the agency, the MOU should be in place and signed, especially if there's changes in administration. So the MOU is very important. Also, for effective partnerships to work, there should be dedication from all agencies involved. The police have a mission to provide quality service to promote safe and secure neighborhoods. They should be fair, present integrity, respect, and service to the customers. All agencies working with the police must be dedicated and provide the same type of mission, as well as their own mission, and vice versa. So all these agencies should promote that mission as well as their own missions as well. Staff must be self-motivated. Our area at Savannah Impact is set up as like a police squad room. So this encourages the co-management of the probation officers and parole officers' caseloads with their police partners. There's not much micromanagement, so everybody knows what is expected, and they basically just get the job done. So staff, they should be self-motivated and self-starters. What makes Savannah Impact work? All agencies must be working together for the same common goal. The focus of Savannah Impact is to manage high-risk offenders. The cases that are sent here are those who need intense supervision and reentry into the community. Basically, this should be the goal of all the cases that are sent here. Along with this goal, we have the goal to provide employment assistance and removal of all the barriers that they might have, like housing assistance, clothing, IDs, food. We have all of those different community collaborations with other agencies that provide that assistance, and cognitive treatment classes as well. If the goals of the other agencies here are different, then we won't get the end result that we need, and everybody will just be butting heads. So all agencies in the in the reentry collaborative should be working together for the same common goal. You must have all the right staff. This goes back to being self-starters. From my experience being a former probation officer and coming over to Savannah Impact, the staff here, you should be seasoned, and you should be a seasoned officer to work here. You must be able to work well in this type of environment and get along with others. If you have somebody who is too high-strung and all about just locking people up, they won't be able to focus on what actually that person needs to remove those barriers that I talked about earlier and assisting the client to get those needs. That's not the kind of person that you would need to work in a reentry unit. Cross-training is very important. The Savannah the police department allows cross-training with parole and probation officers to come in and be cross-trained with firearms training. That's very important when you're conducting field visits and warrant sweeps for the parole and probation officers to know what to do out in the field with the police officers. That's a very good asset to have. My advice to other jurisdictions who are looking to get a reentry unit like Savannah Impact is to have monthly multi-agency staff meetings. This is basically to find out what the other agencies are coming up with in their departments, just to find out new initiatives or policy changes within each department. Information, as Hildy said earlier, is very important. You should encourage all the agencies to share their intel information. This is a good way for cases to be solved. A lot of cases that the police department that we've had have been solved just by officers or the detectives coming here and our crime analysts just looking through data, and we're getting on a parole database, a probation database, and we're just all getting together and looking up cases. So information sharing is really important. Multi-agency staff development training, that's very important. Basically, this encourages staff morale. It also encourages staff to be more involved with each other, and it keeps the staff motivated and integrates new skills. That's all I have, Hildy.
Thank you, Dalia. That was also great concrete examples of all the issues we were just talking about in terms of dealing with some challenging stakeholders. So let's move ahead. It looks like we're going to be about 5 to 10 minutes over the hour, so I hope you can stay with us. But I do want to talk about, finally, this issue of assessing or evaluating partnerships. Chances are your site evaluations are focusing on outcomes, but not necessarily assessing the effectiveness of your collaborative group or partnership processes. So tracking how well the partnership is doing and making any necessary adjustments along the way is very vital. So let's talk about assessing partnerships. Any assessment should ask some key questions. What is the quality and effectiveness of the collaborative group you've formed? What activities took place based on that group's work? Performance measures. What was accomplished by the group? Looking at milestones, outcomes, and impact. Now, here's some issues you may want to explore about the partners in your collaboration. What is the number of partners and the breadth of organizations represented at the table? Do the partners represent the diversity of the community you're working in? What's the level of partner participation, and how satisfied are those partners with the collaboration? So regular surveys of partners to get at these kind of issues may be an important idea. Examine in a very systematic way the processes of the collaborative group. Is there agreement among the partners on the overall purpose and the overall objectives? Or do these need to be revisited and revised from time to time? Is the leadership diverse and effective? Do all partners bring resources to the table? Not just funding, but perhaps equipment or volunteers or other things. Are partners kept informed of activities and accomplishments on a regular basis? Is there an effective communication strategy? Are meetings running effectively, or do people meet without purpose? These are the kinds of things you might want to survey your partners on a regular basis. So information and data should be collected on outcomes, of course. This means looking at partnership-specific outcomes, which generally focus on the types of programs and services undertaken, through your group, but also changes in perhaps the relationships established through your collaboration, progress toward achieving the goals and objectives you've laid out, leveraged resources, policy or system changes as a result of your work, and impacts on crime safety and the quality of life. Sustainability is something you should consider throughout the life of your initiative, certainly. And this includes benchmarks in your assessment that may help keep you focused on that issue of sustainability. Such benchmarks that are measured at regular intervals will keep you focused on the key issues instead of waiting till the very end of your initiative. So here's some benchmarks to consider keeping track of. What level of resources have been secured now and into the future? Have you mobilized community residents and all the various stakeholders involved who can offer political as well as other kinds of support? Have you created policy or system changes that will have lasting impact? And have your programs or strategies been institutionalized in your department? And now, of course, it's always good to use a mix of data collection methods and a combination of quantitative and qualitative data, particularly with a collaboration. So consider using, on a regular basis, surveys, interviews, focus groups, observation of meetings, document reviews, meeting effectiveness assessments. You can find a lot of meeting effectiveness assessments already developed that you can use as the basis of your assessment. And, of course, monitoring crime and quality of life data. So let's stop. Let's talk a little bit among ourselves. If you have a question or if you'd like to offer up some of your experiences, some of the methods that you have used to assess your partnership, or just some general questions about collaboration, now's the time. So would some of you like to talk?
How will I?
Yes.
Hi, it's Benito from the SPI Palm Beach website. One quick, quick information for the sites that are working with immigrant or / illiterate community. One of the obstacles that we encountered was doing the surveys was trying to simplify the surveys to where you gather the information that you want, but at the same time, the surveyee is able to understand what is it that you're trying, what information is it that you're trying to obtain. We've encountered, it's been pretty difficult as far as trying to explain to them what exactly is the question trying to state and how should they answer. We use a gauge. We ask a question and we use the gauge from 5 to 1, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst, and then they, based on that, they have a kind of a gauge of how they should answer. So anyone that's willing, that's going to use surveys or working with this demographic, I'm going to make myself more than available to assist you in conjunction with your research partner on how we created our surveys and how we go about it, because it's not something simple, and it's a little bit difficult working with the illiterate community.
Thank you, Benito. Anyone else?
Hildy, John Edwards,
like
can you hear me? Hildy, John Edwards, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
One of the things that has been of great utility to us is our using existing non-law enforcement collaborations to go into and to become a part of, and then we evolved from that, where we develop relational currency with the different non-traditional stakeholders to first problem solve and to deal with their crisis and to help them. Then once we build those relational inroads, then we use them, gain their trust. They become information outlets and support outlets for our operations. So we've been very successful at looking at those existing collaborations that we could get an invitation to come on board and problem solve.
John, who are some of your partners in those efforts? What kind of
Our number one partner is what's called Family Connections. In Georgia, it's a collaboration of everybody from the Department of Family and Children's Services to our school counselors. And incidentally, Our school counselors have been one of our strongest non-traditional partners because the ability they have to provide real-time intelligence information on very high-risk individuals at school. And we've been very successful with school counselors and social service entities.
Great. What about anybody else? What other kinds of partners have the rest of you worked with? Any other non-traditional or hard-to-reach partners? Okay, well, it looks like
from the Pullman Police Department.
Uh-huh.
Just real fast, because our project is installation of surveillance cameras in areas adjacent to the campus, Washington State University campus, in the bar and fraternity area, due to a high volume of violent assaults occurring. And so from the get-go, one of the groups that we reached out to, actually there were two groups, was our local police advisory committee, which is a committee of made up of citizens that represents different constituencies in the area that meets monthly, that report concerns and questions, etc., to the police chief. But then the second organization that we reached out to was actually the Associated Student Body president and their senate and everything, and they had people that were talking to us throughout the process about concerns and trying to bring a student's perspective to our project, as well as concerns about privacy and how would the videos be used and how would they be posted and would people be able to see them and laugh at them, for example. As well as just kind of going out and doing surveys and outreach of the local business owners and residents that lived in the area that's going to be immediately impacted by this. So we've tried to approach it in a couple different ways, as well as bringing a couple media outlets in from the get-go, not just sending out the press releases, but letting them know of community outreach forums and public meetings and sending them, a lot of information. And therefore, they pushed a lot of information out for us, as well as doing interviews and ride-alongs and getting perspective from students and police officers ahead of and after our public meetings. Just trying to get community buy-in as well as information. Hey, this is what's coming and this is what's going to be put into your community. Here's how to be informed to try to avoid some of the misconceptions that can happen with surveillance and security camera type issues.
Thank you, Alicia. Great perspective. Anybody else have anything to offer in addition?
With Savannah, as part of our Smart Policing Initiative, we also partnered with the local district attorney's office. In partnering with them, we set up meetings with the judges, the DAs, so they would be familiar with our processes and getting the GPS monitoring lined up with their sentencing guidelines and options for them. So that was instrumental in our smart policing initiative as well.
Lots of examples of different kinds of stakeholders to work with. Anybody working with other stakeholders? Okay, well, I know we're a few minutes over our allotted hour, so I want to be respectful of that. So let me say thank you to all the people that have participated, particularly to those who gave our concrete examples, but to others who offered us their experiences and their work in this important area of collaboration. So I hope you found this webinar helpful and worth your while, worth your time, and can find some examples to help you with your work long into the future. So let me turn it over to Chip or Zoe to finish up.
Yeah, Chip is still here. Thank you, Hildy. I'd like to just say just a few brief words. First of all, we have a good webinar series that we've put on, and we're kind of proud of it. We get good participation. And just, again, to say thanks to Hildy and Iris and Vivian and Zoe, all the people at CNA who kind of work in the background to make these things happen. Really appreciate it. really appreciate the participants being on the line. I thought this all went very well today, and there were some excellent points that were brought up. A reminder, of course, to pay attention to the evaluation that comes your way. And I mention this because not only can you give us some feedback on this webinar, but we always ask what other webinars our participants would like to see. And I think we've been fairly responsive to the ideas that have been put forth. So please feel free to do that. And I want to just make a last comment about collaboration, because we like to think of it as a variable in the smart policing and other initiatives that you all are involved in. Quite often, people think about collaboration as just as, you know, like a constant, like something that everybody does and everybody's supposed to do, and or else they, quite frankly, they give it a lot of lip service, and they don't really focus on issues around outreach and inreach and critical constituents and things like that. So this is one of the reasons that we focus our webinar series on collaboration and partnership. And we do have some resources that we have used in our professional settings and that we know other people have used to actually, as Hildy suggested, make different types of measurements, not just of who's in the partnership or what the partnership is doing, but what the depth is, what the breadth of it is, how comfortable people are feeling with each other. So we always just encourage our sites to think about collaboration as something that changes, something that can be managed, and something that's a variable like all the other variables that you're working with. So, and I really don't think that there are a lot of places you can go to get webinars on this topic and get good training on this topic. So I just want to thank especially Hildy again for pulling this together for us. And that's all I have. Iris, did I forget anything?
No, that's it. Thanks again for your time, everybody.
Okay, excellent session, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chip.